To make this interesting, who owns whether it's impactful? Everybody here, okay, you own that. Now, all I'm saying is this, I want you to listen today. I'm going to get you thinking a little bit different ways, shed some light on some different things, and it's natural as we go through this to get you really thinking about maybe some areas that you can develop even more on. I don't want you to leave here thinking, okay, I've got to focus on 20 different things or 15 different things. That's not the purpose. But it's really to pick out the one or two or three things that you really take some action on. And again, you own whether it's an impactful session. I really, really want to, because I care about you. I want to make this something that benefits you and makes you a better leader and brings some things to your organization and helps raise you to the next level. Is that fair enough? All right, so here we go. Let's start with, how do leaders think? And you got a little preview of this earlier today. I'm going to just go through some examples of what do the top leaders do, what's in their mind. And really what it starts with is how they think, and bottom line is they think big. Okay, great top leaders think big. You've heard of BAGS before. B-H-A-G-S, that stands for big, hairy, audacious goals. It's another word that you can substitute in there for the A. But you think about the best leaders, they have big goals. Jordan Spieth probably didn't set his goal of being the number 100th golfer or in the top 100. My guess would be that he actually put the stake in the ground and said, I'm going to be number one. At some point, somebody was like, Jordan, you're out of your mind, man. Number one, are you serious? I mean, just try and get into the top 100. When you think about great leaders like JFK, you know, he didn't stand in front of America, in front of the TV cameras, in front of the world and say, you know, we're going to invest a lot in our space program. He actually had a really compelling big goal. Said, we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And sure enough, this is what happened. People were thinking, what? A man on the moon? Are you kidding? They think big. Secondly, they value their time. They have a premium on their time. Great leaders really recognize this, that it's not just about doing stuff, but it's about doing the right stuff. We've all had days before where you feel like you're in the passenger seat of the car. You know what I'm saying? You ever have those days where you just feel like you're playing defense? Stuff's coming at you, you're dealing with it, you're really not driving your day. Okay, versus when you are in the driver's seat and you just know what you got to get done and you make it happen. Well, think about it. Great leaders, they're very deliberate about how they spend their time. Think about that word. They're deliberate about it. They're intentional about it. Okay, I'll give you some examples. And this is a great book, by the way. I'm going to reference a ton of books. I will say this, in fairness. This is a book that probably 80% of it is really far out there, but there's 3 or 4 really great nuggets in here that you can take away. Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. But here's an interesting thing. If you look at top leaders, I know you can't really see this too clearly, but the point is, this is one of my top managers. You see his schedule is just packed with stuff, right? There's not a lot of white space in there. He goes into his week and he's very deliberate about what he's going to do. Here's another one of my managers. You see, what do you see? I love the color coding too. So he goes into his week. You do not see what? What do you not see here? A lot of empty space, right? A lot of white space. Because what happens, and I know those days where I have a lot of white space in my calendar, I tend not to be really productive. Okay, you've got to start with those tasks that are really important. When you have a plan for the day, it's much easier to be productive, right? Okay. Secondly, they take 100% ownership. A couple great books. One is Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink, we had the privilege of hearing Jocko Willink speak at LAMP in Nashville earlier this year. You can YouTube him and see him. Phenomenal book. It's all about the level of extreme ownership the U.S. Navy SEALs have. And when you have that level of ownership, it leaves no room for excuses. Literally none. There's another great book, The West Point Way of Leadership. Another excellent book about West Point Military Academy, and if the cadets, when they come in there in their first year and they're addressed by a senior officer, there's only 4 things that they can say. Yes, sir. No, sir. I don't understand the question, sir. Or no excuse, sir. That's it. Think about that. That doesn't leave much room for anything else, any excuses. Fantastic book full of great stories and great examples of leadership. And I'll tell you, we all suffer sometimes of not really taking full ownership. I know myself, you know, I play racquetball, and I love racquetball. I play a lot of sports. And I've played for a lot of years of my life. And racquetball, I had one of my advisors come to me a few years back, and he said, hey, I heard you play racquetball. I'd love to play with you. I said, okay, terrific, yeah, let's play. And he said, but I want to bet you that I'm going to beat you. Now, I felt pretty good about my game. I played in tournaments and won a couple and stuff like that. I was playing pretty regularly. I was in good shape. And so I was thinking, I was confident. I was thinking I was going to go in there and win. Well, he ended up just beating me pretty handily. And he did it over and over and over again. Really frustrating for a competitive person. That's frustrating. So I remember there was a period of time I went on a losing streak for like 2 weeks. I didn't win a single game. And I was so frustrated. But then I figured out the reason why. And the reason was Keith had this phenomenal racket. I mean, like this great racket. And I was playing with this old racket that I had for like 10 years. And I'm like, obviously, that's the problem. I remember going to Dick's Sporting Goods. I remember looking at the wall rackets, and I picked out the very biggest, best racket I could find. This thing was $200. I went to the register, and I was so relieved because I figured, okay, now this is it. This is the answer. I went to the cash register, ready with my credit card, and then it just like hit me in the face. Like, this is just ridiculous. What am I thinking? The racket actually is the only consistent part of my game. The problem is me. And there's something that happens when you do take that level of ownership, that all the excuses are gone. And when I went back, I actually turned it around and I went on a winning streak. It was just, honestly, that one little thing. When you take full ownership, true 100% ownership, it opens up the door to do things you never thought you could do. Really cool things. Okay, top leaders, they focus on what they can control. I talked about that a little bit earlier tonight. You've got all kinds of, you've got all kinds of things you can't control, right? Why waste time thinking about it? Focus on the things you can control. There are 3 things that I can control. I can control what I think, what's up here. I can control what I say, what comes out of my mouth. And I control the things that I do, right? Those are the 3 things nobody in here can control. I can control, you can influence them the same way nobody can control those 3 things for you, right? So there's a great book. If you haven't read this, I highly recommend it. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Phenomenal book. Viktor Frankl has an incredible story. He was a concentration camp survivor and wrote about those experiences. And what he realized, and the realization and the whole theme of this book is, he realized that even despite these horrible things that were happening to him, these horrible experiences, that his captors could take away every physical freedom he had. They could put him through horrible torture. But what they could not do was impact what he chose to think about. He could actually, while these horrible things were happening, he learned to transplant himself somewhere else. He could be sitting on a beach drinking a Mai Tai mentally while all these things were happening. Fascinating book. A fascinating book about the power of the mind. An easy read, highly, highly recommend it. So great leaders focus on the things that they control. They manage their emotions. I talked about this earlier today. We all go through ups and downs, but the key is, are you making decisions based on emotions? Here's a great example. And by the way, I'm happy to share any of these tools with you. At the end, I'll show you some information. This is a great tool that I use that just helps you understand the alignment between, are your thoughts leading you to take actions that are in alignment with your goals? Real simple. So when you have a certain emotion and something drives your emotion, it causes you to have certain thoughts, and then it causes you to then make certain decisions and take actions. And all it is the ability to hit a pause button on that and say, okay, is what I'm doing really going to line up with what I want to do, the outcome that I'm trying to achieve? Great leaders are really good at having that pause button. They don't act emotionally. And I've had the fortune of working with terrific people. I've had people that they had the skill, they had the talent, they had the abilities, but they lacked the emotional competency, and they weren't able to rise up high in leadership because they just lacked that ability, whereas other people have demonstrated that, have risen incredibly high. It's an incredibly powerful ingredient to this formula. Next is, great leaders trust their gut. They really go with their gut. Who has ever made a decision where they went against their gut and then you look back and you're like, geez, I knew the right thing to do there and I didn't do it? For some reason, every time I make a decision and it goes against my gut, I look back, I'm like, my gut for some reason is like the smartest part of my body. I don't understand. If I just trust it every time, it leads me in the right direction. If you think one of your people is starting to check out, they probably are. If you think that somebody's starting to interview somebody somewhere else, they probably are. If you think somebody needs a hug, they probably do. If you think somebody needs a kick, they probably do. Have you ever thought about somebody and their name pops into your head, and then and you're saying to yourself, geez, I should call that person. And then they call you? You ever had that happen? That happens all the time to me. I will tell you, there's a reason somebody's name pops in your head. I'm convinced of it. There's a reason your gut tells you to do something. It's trying to lead you in the right direction. Great leaders trust their gut. I can't tell you how important that is. There's a rule also that I use, something called the 10-10-10 rule. This is a decision-making tool. It's really, really good. And the 10-10-10 rule is real simple. All it is think about when you're making a decision, think about how will you feel in 10 minutes, how will you feel in 10 months, and then how will you feel in 10 years? Okay, how will you feel in 10 minutes after you make the decision? How will you feel in 10 months? And how will you feel in 10 years? And if all those line up with you getting the right outcome, go for it. That's a great way to just kind of look at it through a different lens with a different perspective. Lastly, under the think category, great leaders are just students of the business. They study leadership. Now, there's a few ways that you learn leadership. You learn by leading. So if you're in a leadership role, you're learning by making mistakes, and you're learning by having successes, and that's how you grow. You also learn when you get led. Who has ever had a bad leader? Anybody ever had a bad leader before?
Yes.
Oh, come on.
A lot.
I have. Everybody has. At some point, you may have been led. You can learn as much from that as you can from being led by somebody who's a great leader. Hopefully, you've had great leaders. But don't get discouraged if you don't, because you're going through a learning process then. But the other way that you learn leadership is devouring opportunities to learn leadership. You've got terrific opportunities here at this conference with some absolutely phenomenal speakers. I'm a really big reader, as you can tell. Here's my favorite leadership book, John Maxwell, who we've actually had in these conferences before. John Maxwell, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I think the very best book. I've read this a dozen times. There's so much in here. So much in here. If you haven't got a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. Here's the other thing, too. For me to sit there and go through books, it just takes time. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm in the car a lot. Even if you're not in the car a lot, here's an easy way to just increase your uptake on books. If you haven't heard of Audible, and there's a lot of other services, I like Audible. I can listen, I can download any book, I can listen to it in the car. And what's really cool about this is I figured out a feature. I can set it at like 1.5 speed or 2 times the speed. So if you came in my car, you'd hear a book that was like super fast. But I can read a 10-hour book in 5 hours. It's amazing. And you know what? Your brain actually, you can train your brain. It just starts to assimilate information faster. It is unbelievable. Game-changing stuff. Okay? Highly recommend that. Okay. Let's move on. Let's talk about what leaders say. What's the communication style? What are the things that actually come out of their mouth? Here's one key thing. They talk about their vision relentlessly. Over and over and over again. Here's a key question. If I went into your organization tomorrow and I asked your people or I asked your team and asked them what is the vision of your team or the organization, what would they say? Think about it for a second. Would they tell me the vision that you would want them to tell me? Would they tell me a vision that lines up with your vision? Would they be able to articulate it? Would it sound totally different? Or would they look at me with a blank stare? Okay, how often are you talking about your vision? Is it a compelling vision that gets people motivated, that they want to get around? You think about some great companies. Amazon started with their vision being, hey, we want to digitize every single book periodical that's ever been out there. That's pretty bold. Tesla, Elon Musk company. They want to build a fully automated, self-driving vehicle. No human needs to interact with it at all. Pretty powerful. Elon's other company, SpaceX, their mission and vision is to habitate Mars. That's pretty cool. If I was an engineer working for SpaceX, I think I'd be okay putting in some extra hours because I want to be part of that vision. That's pretty cool. So ask yourself, how well do your people know your vision? Here's another one. Great leaders set really clear expectations. Not only clear expectations, but consistent expectations. Okay, so here's another exercise you can do, and I do this with my team all the time. I don't care if you've got 50 people on your team, 5, 10, whatever. Get them in a room and just throw out some questions. Ask them to take a sheet of paper and say, I'm going to ask them, like, just throw out some questions, write down on your sheet of paper, and ask them questions about your expectations or the organization's expectations. How many meetings do you expect advisors to set? Or agents to set? How many, what's the time frame between the first and the second meeting? How do you ask for referrals? When do you ask for referrals? How do you track them? Whatever things that you're actually throwing out there as expectations, ask your leaders. What I will tell you is every time I do this, I'm surprised. My hope would be that everybody answers the same thing. But let's think about this for a minute. If my expectation is that a new advisor or an advisor in general needs to set 10 first meetings a week, let's just say hypothetically, and I've got 10 leaders, and 9 of them say 10 and say the same thing, but one of them says 8. From an advisor standpoint, what are they thinking now? What's going through their head? They're thinking they're confused. They're like, well, I don't get it. Why are there 2 answers? Confusion is your enemy. That will slow people down. And secondly, they're going to go on the path of least resistance, right? They respect all the leaders. Okay, everybody said 10, but I really like this leader said 8. I think I'm going to go with the 8. Right? So that's so important to have high producing and productive people and a culture. That's what really top leaders recognize. Make sense? Okay. They also inspire confidence. I've always said what would be great, I wish I could come up with like this confidence pill, because I think that's the missing ingredient for people reaching the next level big time. If all they did was have confidence and you gave them this injection of confidence, stand back and look out, because they will do unbelievable things. The fear level goes down, right? I see some heads nodding. This is so key. But here's the magical thing that I figured out a lot of years ago. You can actually borrow confidence. You can, as a leader, lend confidence to somebody in a situation. I'll give you a great example. I played baseball growing up, and I was the type of batter that either struck out or I hit a home run. I very rarely hit a single or anything like that. I was exciting to watch, but I was not the guy you wanted at the plate when there was a clutch situation. So, fast forward to a clutch situation. We had bases loaded, and we're down by, I think it was a run or 2. And I went up to the plate. I just remember this vividly. I remember walking up, and I was nervous. I was really nervous because it was like super high pressure situation. And all I'm saying to myself is, again, I'm thinking not that I'm going to hit a home run. I'm thinking that I'm going to strike out. I kept saying to myself, please don't strike out. 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 I'm literally walking to the plate. And as I get to the batter's box, I look over and I see my players, my teammate who's on first base. You know, he takes a couple steps up to take his lead, and he looks over and realizes it's me, and he does one of these. And I'm like, oh man, come on, I didn't need that. My confidence is already shot. And my third base coach, fortunately, I think saw me like start to unravel, and he called timeout. I went over to the third base coach, and he stood there, and my player who was on third base, you know, it's me and the two of them, my buddy, teammate says, John, honestly, just hit the ball. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, thank you. That's terrific. But my coach said something unbelievable. It was so quick and so easy. Is all he did, very calmly, he said, oh, I know he's going to hit the ball, but listen, John, when you hit the ball, try and hit it to right field so we can get in 2 runs instead of 1. And I just remember, like, being amazed, like, wow, he's so confident that I'm going to hit the ball. And I'm like, I am going to hit the ball. Like, why wouldn't I hit the ball? Of course I'm going to hit the ball. Okay, I'm going to hit the ball. I'm definitely going to hit the ball. Why would I not hit the ball? Literally. And I got to the plate. The next pitch that came in, hit it, grand slam over the fence. It was an awesome, it was like my unbelievable, my one sports moment that I will never forget. But here's the interesting thing. I am convinced that I would have struck out had I not had that brief interaction with my coach. Absolutely convinced of it. Because I was talking myself into it. I literally was nervous enough, I would have rather been beamed by a fastball in my head, get knocked down conscious, and have them carry me over to first base and walk in the winning run. That's what I would have preferred. But he changed my thought. He lent me his confidence just for that one moment, and it made all the difference in the world. The greatest thing is then after that, every time I got up to the plate, I had a little bit more confidence because I had done something that I would not have been able to do without his help. That is true leadership. You all have the ability to inspire confidence and lend confidence in situations. Okay, fantastic ability. Candid. This is another thing great leaders are really good at. Jack Welch in the GE Way, fantastic leadership book. Jack Welch is the king of candor. And he said, you know what, if you don't ask for that, if you don't try and breed a candid environment, you will get a bunch of people nodding their heads and saying telling you what you want, what they think you want to hear, versus the true information and really challenging thoughts of the people thinking out of the box. Jack Welch had a great way of actually grading people, and it was the top 20%, and then the middle 70, and then the bottom 10. The bottom 10 he got rid of every year. Pretty brutal. Middle 70 he developed, and the top 20 is where you spend your time. But that was just the element of a candor, the components of candor. How candor helps an environment get better, and it helps your organization get better, and it only comes out if you reward it. The next one is transparency. Okay, how many times do people wonder why somebody's making a decision? When things are done kind of too much behind the scenes and there's not transparency, people are led to come to their own conclusions on stuff as to why that leader made a decision. And guess what? Usually, it's a lot more dramatic and it's a lot worse than the reality. What I've found is the more transparent I am, the better the results are. It's unbelievable. What this means to me is no side deals. Okay, I don't do side deals. Now, don't confuse this with differentiation. I'm a big believer in differentiation, which means that I'm going to give my top people more. They do more, they're going to get more. But I'm very clear about it. I let people know that. But I would never make a decision that I would not feel comfortable standing in front of my whole organization and say, hey, here's a decision I made. It doesn't mean that everybody will like it, because don't confuse that. That's appeal-based leadership. Leaders that only make decisions that they feel everybody will like. That's not leadership. That's not. That's, taking a survey and consensus. That's not leadership. Leadership, you got to make tough decisions that some people won't like, but if you explain the rationale, they may not like it, but they're going to understand it. And the trust level goes up. When you have a transparent environment and you pull the curtain back and say, hey, here's the deal, here's how it works, trust goes up dramatically, results follow. Okay, very key. Frequent feedback. Here's a great question. Is sometimes I'll have leaders that come to me and say, I'm really frustrated with this person. And we talk about it and I say, okay, have you shared that with this person? And a lot of times they say no. Like, okay, well, why are you sharing it with me if you haven't shared it with them? Be candid and give them frequent feedback. Sometimes if I ask a leader, hey, how would you rate this person on a scale of 1 to 10? They may say, well, a 7. Well, if I ask that person what they think their leader would rate them, it should not be anything other than a 7, right? If they said it was a 9 or a 10, well, that leader is really not doing a good job of giving feedback. Okay? Same way at the other end. It shouldn't be a 3 or 4. That's when you know you've got great level of feedback. People need to know how they're doing. I had an advisor talk not too long ago, and she said, you know what, I just don't know how I'm doing. Okay? I went right to the leader and said, okay, we got a problem here. This person doesn't know how they're doing. That should never be the case, because you can't get better if you don't know what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. I'm always looking for feedback. I asked for feedback right after my last presentation. All right, what did I do bad? What did I do okay? What was good? Okay. Address conflict early. Okay, now, here's the tough thing. Most people don't like conflict. So it's easy to step away from it sometimes and try to let it handle itself. First of all, does that work most of the time? I'm not saying never, but most of the time, if you step away and try and let conflict handle itself, it doesn't usually work. Okay, and I'll give you a great example. I had an advisor, my top advisor, who I came minutes from having to let go, from actually terminating this advisor. And this happened maybe a year and a half ago. And you know what? It started as something very small. And it was my fault that I didn't address the conflict soon enough. It literally happened, it started with like a split on a case. It was like a few $100. I mean, literally it was ridiculously small. But this molehill became a mountain because it became worse and worse and worse, and it escalated and spiraled into other areas, and it got out of control. And it literally almost meant this person's job. And it would have been a loss for everybody. We would have lost. He's still today one of my best producers. And it stemmed from me not addressing it. And I just got the two people in the room right in the beginning and said, okay, let's work this out. What happened? What happened? Let's figure it out. My guess is it would have been like a 15-minute conversation, would have ended there. Instead, this lasted like months. I own it, my bad, not addressing conflict. Top leaders know the importance of addressing conflict early. I talked about earlier, set the pace. Okay, I will tell you that's important. You've got to think about that. I gave you the example of the Hawaii trip. I hope that sank in because to me that's one of the most important things that I see wrong in organizations. You can feel it when you go in there. You know what I'm saying? You walk in and it's like you just know, okay, this is moving faster. It's like, this is too slow. And are you going to attract people if the pace is wrong? That also ties into culture, and it starts with the leader setting the pace. Okay, people run faster if you're running against Olympic athletes versus if I'm running against high school athletes. Even though I'm the same runner, it's going to motivate me to run a little faster if I'm running on a track with Olympic athletes, right? The leader owns that. Okay, they also create urgency. What fascinates me is there's a whole business incremental lift to your business that will happen when you create urgency, and the leader does this. So I'm a big believer that business today is much better than business next week, even if it's the same amount of business. Okay, so if I have a case, let's say I've got 10,000 in commissions it's supposed to pay this week, and for some reason it does not, and it rolls over to next week for whatever reason. That's actually not a good thing because I've now taken 2 weeks to feel good about the same piece of business. Now that 10 grand of business really equates to 5 grand coming in over 2 weeks. It doesn't help. When it's urgent and you're moving things through, then you're moving on to the next thing. It's like if I'm a hunter and I've got a big stockpile of food, I'm not going to be as interested in going out and hunting there as I have the scarcity mentality. It's abundance versus scarcity mentality. Urgency is critical to business. Urgency with getting clients through the process. Urgency with setting appointments. Urgency with getting business paid, everything. Okay, so that's the element of the things that a leader can communicate to set that tone and set that culture. Okay, let's move on to the most important thing, the do category. Because what you think and what you say is critical, but not even as critical as what you do. It's the actions the leader takes that's absolutely critical. What I will start with is the most important. You have to act with integrity. And I know everybody nods their head on this, and of course, you've got to act with integrity. I will tell you, this is an area I've seen a lot of careers ruin over this, but this is the leader is a challenge because you really, what you do and what you don't do, and how you address things and how you don't address things, paints a picture. And I've seen slippery slopes where organizations crumble to the ground because of these types of things that happen. There's no gray areas, because when you have a gray area, then it becomes charcoal, and then all of a sudden you're in an area you don't want to be. Penn Mutual, our CEO, Eileen McDonald, talks about there's no right way to do the wrong thing. I agree 100%. You're going to see lots of things as a leader, and you do. And again, how you address them or how you don't is going to communicate volumes to people. If you address it harshly and quickly, that will set the tone for your organization. If you turn a blind eye to it, it's going to set the tone for your organization. Another great book, Norman Schwarzkopf. It Doesn't Take a Hero. All about his fascinating book. All about his experiences in leadership, military leadership, but also during Desert Storm. And he tells a story about he came to inspect an area, a campground, and this was in the hot zone, so this was full battle gear and camouflage and everything like that. And he's coming through the woods and through the jungle, and from like half a mile away, he can see one of his not only a soldier, a commanding officer or a ranking officer in not only not fatigues, but in red boxer shorts. Like red boxer shorts in a military zone where you're supposed to be camouflaged. Not only putting his own life at risk, but everybody's life at risk. And he tells the story about how he addressed the commanding officer, and what's interesting is it doesn't happen overnight like that, right? It's not like one day they're perfect and then the next day people are running around in red boxers. No. It starts with the slow loosening of the standards. So maybe it started with, okay, well, you got to wear the full fatigues, but you don't have to worry about the helmet. And then it's okay, well, you don't have to wear your outer shirt, but at least, your green t-shirt. And then it's okay, well, just, the green shorts and the green t-shirt. And then it's like, all right, whatever, wear whatever you want. And before you know it, it's like, how do we get here? Literally. And that's what the leader was saying. I don't even know how it got here. Well, it got there because you had little lapses in your judgment, and over time it was that slippery slope. That's what I see happen in organizations. Take a firm stand against lapses in integrity. Secondly, as they fail, hey, great leaders recognize the importance of this. If you not only do great leaders fail, but you have to encourage the failure. Because that's the only way people are pushing the envelope and trying, stepping outside their comfort zones. Great leaders have failed. Abraham Lincoln went bankrupt. Many failures. Lost in 7 elections before he was elected as president, considered one of the best presidents in the United States. Michael Jordan, one of the best basketball players on the face of the planet, actually got cut from his high school basketball team. How'd you like to be that coach, huh? Hello. Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first newscast job. Fired, and the reason why was because they said she had no talent. And J.K. Rowling was, her Harry Potter books were turned down by the first 12 publishers. First 12 publishers turned down Harry Potter. Okay, Harry Potter, the brand, has generated $20 billion in revenue. What if she stopped at like the 11th rejection, or the 12th? What if she was like, you know what, they're probably right. I guess it's not really that good of a book. Let me just stop here. Could you imagine that? Crazy. So great leaders fail. They're also visible. What I will tell you, this is another great thing. I can come into an organization. I can predict before I come into an organization, by the way, based on some of the things I hear that are challenges or even the results, what some of the reasons are. This is one of the biggest ones. Okay, that door that you have in your office is one of the biggest enemies to your effectiveness as a leader. Because if you're not out there with your people, then somebody else is leading them, right? You're not leading them, somebody else is leading them. Okay, you have to be visible, step outside. I catch myself at this sometimes. You know, yeah, we got emails, we got phone calls, we got all kinds of work to do. You know, but if I've got my door, I rarely close my door. Even if it's a confidential meeting. You have to be accessible as a leader, you got to be out there. And by the way, I even put in my schedule to that first point, that first one at the beginning with the schedule, I put in there MBWA. What does that stand for? Management, although it should be leadership, by walking around. Schedule it. That's a key task, right? Put it in your book. I actually have it in there. My assistant puts in my book like half an hour here and there, half an hour between meetings. Just walk around. Just talk to people. Because I get some of the best stuff from just walking around and talking to people, right? First, I was like, hey, what's going on? How's your week going? Tell me you got a case, and it's like, wow, it's like that. All of a sudden, you just get some great info that now helps you lead the organization. It's unbelievable. Leading by example. What I will tell you is, if you don't like what's happening, and that could be a culture thing, it could be an attitude, it could be results, you've got to look in the mirror. So if I know I'm trying to drive referrals, but I, as the leader, don't ask for referrals when I do joint work, let's say, well, I can't expect my advisors to do it if I'm not demonstrating it. Okay, if I don't like the fact that my advisors are